Podcast, the show where every week we get one step closer to our goal of becoming top podcasters of all time. Right, Will?
Yeah, Willis the Realist here.
And I'm Rich. Welcome to the show, episode number 4.
Number 4.
And this is going to be a really fucking weird one, Will. I mean, really exciting and weird. We have an interesting mystery of history today.
Nice.
So basically, a tall tale, if you will, an urban legend. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. We'll dissect that. A fun little tale about Mr. Al Bielek. It's an interesting one, dude. It's like something maybe you might not believe. It's a little unbelievable.
I'll hold my speculation towards the end.
Right. You have to hear the story, the whole truth and nothing but the truth until you can decide.
If it's not.
Right. So let me tell you a little story about this guy, Ed Cameron. I know I mentioned earlier his name was Al Bielek.
Okay, I totally thought maybe you told me the wrong segment name. So, who are they?
Well, they're actually the same person, but you'll find out.
Where did those names come from?
If you so listen. Okay, so Ed Cameron was born August 4th, 1916 in Long Island, New York. And his brother Duncan Cameron was born in 1917. So these guys, really smart dudes, went to like Princeton or Harvard or one of those schools. And then afterwards in 1940, they joined the Navy. Both of them, brothers. They worked hand in hand in the advanced studies, writing up like classified documents for the Navy. Like,
no kidding.
You know, the shit that we're not supposed to find out about. You know, that kind of shit they were into.
Handwriting it.
Well, I'm sure it was like a typewriter or something.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. This is the 1940s, so I'm sure they had that shit.
Yeah, I think they had like Adele or something they could use.
Dude, I'm getting Adele. So in about 1941, because, you know, they were office dudes.
Yeah.
You know, in 1941, they were sent out to get basically their sea legs. And they went out on the U.S. Pennsylvania for about 9 months to basically, you know, be real Navy sailors.
And the Pennsylvania was going to do that.
I guess so. It really, you know, like put hair on their balls, I guess.
I got what you meant by the sea legs.
So in October of 1941, they returned.
Mm-hmm.
They returned to Pearl Harbor for a ship overhaul. And during this time, they kind of were on leave, and so they went down to San Diego and kind of chilled, and you know, probably hung out with some ladies, and
I like these guys already.
Do what you got to do. So they were set to go back in December of 1941, December 5th, if you will. And I don't know if you remember what happened.
Wasn't that Pearl Harbor?
The Pearl Harbor bombing happened December 7th, 1941.
That's correct.
But wait, before they went back to duty, they were stopped by some special Navy officers and said, maybe you guys don't go up to Pearl Harbor and go back to duty. We're going to ship you up to San Francisco because we have, you know, intelligence saying that there's a possibility of Japan attacking Pearl Harbor within the next 48 hours.
So that dude was looking out. That guy was a homie.
They were saying basically, you two guys are way too important to be lost in some
pawns to this scheme.
Bombing. Correct.
Yeah.
I want to mention that I know all this, Will, because I watched endless hours of Al Bielek online YouTube videos where he's basically lecturing and, you know, telling his story. So like everything that I've told you so far and will continue to tell you will be from his mouth. Also kind of mixed in with some urban legend stories that I got from other sources. But basically most of it is from Al Bielek himself telling this story.
Nice.
So,
but what about Ed? You gonna tell any of Ed's story?
Same person. But we will get to that. So now Ed Cameron. They've just escaped Pearl Harbor bombing, and you know they're up in
escaped is kind of a big word. It seems like they were led to more pleasantries,
and thankful for that because otherwise we wouldn't have the rest of this story to tell. So after a few years, him and his brother were working with Nikola Tesla on a bunch of things like an invisibility project that they were doing, and I believe it was called Project Rainbow at that time in 1941.
Okay.
And they were basically even the German army was trying to work on their own sort of invisibility thing for their U-boats and stuff, but they were unsuccessful and they kind of ditched the project and stuff. So after a few years of working with Nikola Tesla on this project and stuff, and even Nikola Tesla ended up quitting because he was worried about the danger that was involved, including humans, in this project. And he was saying, I don't think I want to be involved. And he was like, fuck it, I'm out.
Well, that's funny you say that, because it seems like through time Tesla had made more of a moral stance on certain projects.
Right.
As opposed to just going with the project for the sake of being able to do it.
He was maybe the smart one in the group. Like you were saying, he had some morals, and he was like, I'm not down with doing whatever y'all are doing with these fucking crazy-ass experiments, endangering people. I'm getting the fuck out. So they continued the experiments with a doctor by the name of Dr. John Van Neumann. And he was like, he worked with Duncan and Ed on these projects and stuff, and working to create these invisibility cloaks, basically. They wanted to make these warships, these battleships, invisible not only to radar, but to the naked eye. So if you were to look, you couldn't even see these fucking ships. Their first test was on the USS Eldridge on July 22nd, 1943. In the beginning, it went smooth. You know, the first 20 minutes, everything was working. The ship was invisible to radar and sight. But all of a sudden, the captain noticed something a little weird. He noticed the water surrounding the Eldridge had disappeared. And he was worried about the ship had no support. You know, if the water wasn't there supporting the ship, the ship's hull was just going to fall apart. And so he started calling Dr. John Newman on the walkie-talkie that they had and saying, like, we got to, you know, cancel the test. We got to stop. Or the ship's going to fall apart. And so they did. They stopped the test right then.
That worked? Oh, my God.
So they stopped the test, and some of the crew got really sick off the first test, like kind of losing it mentally and physically. So they had to get rid of some of the crew. And then, so for the second test that wasn't planned until August of that year, they had to get a whole new crew to come on and volunteer to be a part of this crazy fucking test, you know.
Ooh, how do you have somebody volunteer? You probably don't tell them really what's going on.
Right, but they have to volunteer because, you know, you have to sign waivers because shit might happen to you, and we don't want you to sue the fucking U.S. Navy.
But they probably just bury them in documents that they just don't read and they just sign to get it done with.
Right. Or do a lot weirder things that I'm going to explain later.
Oh, nice segue.
So the second test happened on August 12th, 1943. So Ed Cameron and Duncan Cameron are on the ship as well, manning the generator again. And we have Dr. John Van Neumann, and he's watching on a ship, you know, down the way, just chilling, watching, making sure everything...
In a safe place, probably.
Yes. And so the second test goes off. And the first few seconds, everything was fine. Then, when the ship vanished, you know, as it's supposed to, Ed started to see this blue light. And then all of a sudden, all the like gauges and stuff like that on all the mechanical stuff on the inside of the ship started going all fucking wonky and crazy and stuff. And so like he's like, "What the fuck? You know, we need to get out of here." And so
as I would too.
Right, totally. So him and his brother Duncan go up on top of the deck of the ship and stuff, and they start seeing all the other crew members like all discombobulated and stuff, and kind of walking around and like being all weird and stuff like that. And it's
like a state of confusion just all around.
So, and then just like that, the ship returns back to Philadelphia, because that's where the experiment happened both times.
They should name it after that.
Yeah, it is called the Philadelphia Experiment. Did I not mention that?
Oh, you did.
Did we get into this far and I did not mention it was called the Philadelphia Experiment?
You did.
Yeah. Yay. So, like, boom, they're back to Philadelphia. But if you remember, you've heard some stuff about this story. The Philadelphia Experiment. When they returned back, because they were missing for 4 hours. There were even stories of like the possibility of the ship showed up in Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah,
like,
there were sightings. Yeah,
there were sightings from a bunch of witnesses and stuff, and even the government had to explain that. Well, like, oh, it took a secret channel that you're not allowed to go down, but us Navy ships are allowed to go down. But you know, like, so there was that. People saw a green mist and saw the ship disappear, and you know,
that's what I heard.
Several minutes, and so like when it returned. like everyone was freaking out and stuff. Like some of the sailors
Oh,
were
yeah.
infused into
Like their
the
molecules combined with
right,
the ship. To
with
make
the
one.
steel of the
Yeah.
ship. So they're half were above the ship and half below the ship.
Man,
Like that's fucking crazy.
talk
dude.
about a bad day.
That's like some time warp shit gone wrong. You know what I mean?
That's a great name for it. A time warp.
This story is beyond crazy, and it only is going to get crazier because during all of this mess, when all this was going crazy, and Ed and Duncan came up on top of the deck and they looked out and they saw all this. They even saw some of the sailors infuse into the ship, one of them being their brother Jim. Their younger brother.
Who the fuck's Jim?
Jim is their younger brother that joined the Navy after the war started, and he was there kind of one of the volunteers. As this,
And they didn't have any idea about this?
No, they did. They knew.
They didn't like Jim.
He was not part of the the generator crew.
Yeah.
And so he was up top, and he was a part of the I'm stuck in the steel crew.
So what happened to these guys? Do you know?
So Jim died. So sorry.
Because from being half ship, half man.
Yes, exactly. You can't live a life like that. You can't, no one's going to marry you.
Yeah.
So what happened to Ed and Duncan is they were like, we got to get the fuck out of here. And so they both looked at each other and had pretty much the same idea. They jumped off the ship. And they're like, we're going to go swim to shore. And so they jumped off the ship and, well, they didn't hit the water, dude. They just kept on falling.
They fell through time and space?
And falling. And falling. And falling. Endless. Falling and falling and falling. And where did they land? Well, they blacked out, basically. And when they woke up, Al explains that they woke up in hospital beds. And they were both kind of like out of it a little bit. When the orderlies came in and they were asking some questions. What's going on? What happened and stuff like that. Because they didn't remember the USS Eldridge or anything that happened during the Philadelphia experiment. So they're like, what the fuck happened? And they're like, well, you guys had some major radiation and we brought you in, we're dealing with that and stuff. And so you guys need to chill here for a while. And so they were in this hospital.
That was the doctor saying it?
Yeah, he used that vernacular, I believe.
Yeah, bedside manner is off the chain.
And you'll find out why, because when they started watching televisions, which was weird to them coming from 1943, because the televisions were color televisions, and they were mounted onto the wall with this like swivel unit where you can turn the television. This kind of blew their mind at the moment.
A wall mount swivel?
Right. And they've never seen anything like that in 1943. They're like, what's going on? So they start asking questions and stuff. And the TV that they're watching is all like educational. And it's talking about the history of the United States. And they're starting to notice some changes. There's some geographical changes to the United States that they're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And they start asking questions to the orderlies and the nurses and stuff like that. And they start saying, what's going on here? Yeah. And the nurses start explaining, you're in the year 2137. And so they're like, whoa, what? And so they're like, tell us about what's going on because we don't remember anything, what's happening, and so they start learning about the world that is 2137. Yeah. And it's a crazy world, dude. The first 4 weeks they were recovering from their radiation. They asked to see some maps. They're stuck in these hospital beds and stuff, and they're like, let's see some maps. And they start noticing.
So the hospital had maps on hand in case their patients wanted to see some fucking maps.
Apparently. Because as he explains, they were given maps. Uh-huh. And, I mean, it's not hard to go to the store and get a fucking map.
Yeah, but who's the hospital bitch who goes, hey, get these patients some maps?
So they get some maps, and they start noticing, the differences. Half of California is gone, underwater. I believe the coast now starts at, Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles.
So we good.
As opposed to. San Diego is gone. There's a big chunk of the East Coast missing. Like the coast goes all the way into like Atlanta, Georgia. So like half of Florida is missing, and half the like North Carolina, and like all these eastern states are missing. So it's he's starting to see this, and he's asking more questions like what what happened? What caused all this? And what's the meaning? What's going on? How was I brought here? And they didn't have answers to why he was brought here. And,
was it Jim?
You know, was it the brother Jim orchestrating this all behind the grave? So, like, he asked more questions, and there was just like a total, complete collapse of the U.S. Infrastructure, basically. U.S. was not considered a nation at that time.
No kidding.
Most was under kind of like military or martial law, basically. He claims that there was like a major war between the year 2000 and 2025. That's what they told him. So
my calculations are correct. The 25-year war?
In that time, somewhere in that time, there was a war.
Oh.
He was told about the whole Bush and Gore, mix up between that whole mess, between who's going to be president and everything.
The Florida ballots?
That whole mess. He was told all about that. And, because that's when the war started. And if you remember, Bush was president when 9/11 happened and when the war on Iraq and, all this stuff.
No, I'm pretty sure it's Dick Cheney was
So
president.
maybe he's talking about that. Maybe this is the beginning of the end, dude.
Yeah.
So, we are actually living in it, the time when he is...
And talking about it.
So right. Yeah, maybe years down the line, 20 years, hundreds of years down, maybe in 2137. They're listening to this recording of Evolution of a Podcast.
And they're going, this is shit.
But then they're like, oh, that's cute that they think like this.
Yeah.
And so back to Ed Cameron, he was asking all these questions about, what happened and all this stuff. And he said that there were earthquakes and even there might have possibly been like a virus or a bug that a bunch of people got
Corona.
In this time between 2020 and 2025.
No
so
shit.
Within that time, a bunch of people caught this bug. So the population now, as we know it, is what, like 7 billion or something like that. It's around that number. It's approximation.
I'll take your word for it.
That was not looked up. It's just complete guess. But it's around that number. And in 2137, he said there was 300 million, dude. 300 million people. That's not... There's 11 million in Los Angeles alone. Him and his brother Duncan spent 6 weeks in this hospital bed, in 2137.
Uh-huh.
And then something crazy happened. He disappeared, dude. Just him, not Duncan, just him. He disappeared. And where did he go?
I'm going to say he went back to where his original timeline was.
Nope. He went to 2749.
Naturally.
Right. The 28th century. Ed Cameron spent 2 years there. And he had amazing stories to tell about this time. He said he became a tour guide. And he learned a lot from this time period. Mm-hmm. He's traveled a lot of places. He said that New York City became a museum. A lot of it was still intact. So they kind of turned it into this museum where it's like, look how the people of the 21st century lived. And this world was totally different in 2749. It was like beyond. It was run by synthetic computers. Like everything was free. So you had this socialist society where there was no money and everything was given to you, handed to you for free. The computer system, because he was fascinated about that and about how that worked and who invented this computer system that's ruling the world and controlling the world, basically.
Yeah.
Like this computer system was like even policing the world where like if there were any crimes, there weren't that many, but if there were any crimes, like there were certain different levels. They had colors like yellow, red, orange. So if you got into a red, so
very
like
similar colors, it can get very confusing.
so like if you got into the red, you murdered some dude.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen very often, but if you did, you would have to go in to see the computer system and basically be reprimanded.
The computer system is the judge, jury, and executioner.
Right. And literally executioner, because Al Bielek said that most of the time those people would just be taken out. Just right on spot, just erased. Knowing that information, you didn't fuck up in this time.
Yeah.
There was no class system. There was no like rich people had more and the poor people had less. Everyone had equal and was given equal. And there was
But they all had jobs still that were
No. See, that's another thing.
jobs.
They didn't work. So the way they did the work, you just had to basically contribute to society, as he said. And some people, you would learn a trade, you would get educated in something, and you would just contribute to society. As long as you were doing that, you were still giving the rewards of all these things that was a part of this computer society. There were some people that lived outside of those means, and some people, some people that may have, committed a crime and a murder or something like that, and didn't want to go see the computer for reprimand, and they just bolted. And they were like,
so they were off the grid.
Yep.
So they're not given anything.
So another thing about this time, 2749, he said there were like floating cities. Cities that would just float. They said they discovered, how anti-gravity worked and stuff. And these had floating cities that can move. And he explains these cities that had 2-mile high skyscrapers. 2 miles high, with over 300 stories of building.
They figured out anti-gravity.
Right. He said the cities were as tall as they were wide, and they, if they would move, and you would go visit some of these cities and stuff like that. And
the city would move its whole entire self to another city,
right?
Close enough.
It's kind of crazy. Like he's kind of explaining this like Jetsons type world in 2749 where like there's like moving sidewalks and like tubes that take you to places and stuff, not teleportation but take you to other places.
Futurama.
I hope we get to see something like that someday that happens in our lifetime. If it's in 2749, I probably won't make it.
Man, that's the attitude of a dead person right there.
He spends 2 years in 2749 up to 2751, and then for some weird reason gets sent back. And he gets sent back to...
By who?
I don't know. He claims he doesn't know how he got sent back. He got sent back to 2137, where his brother Duncan was. Yeah. Still in the hospital.
Duncan on him.
Yep. And he grabs his brother, and they get sent back to where?
The original timeline.
Nope.
Fuck. Back to the Future.
They get sent back to 1983.
What the fuck?
Yeah, dude. They're in 1983, and they're all of a sudden transported to, he said, like a fenced-in yard that's like at a Navy base. They find out when they go into this elevator, and they go down this like 20 floors or something, and open the door, and out walks this older man, and he says, "Hello, gentlemen, I'm Dr. John Van Neumann, and I've been waiting for you guys." And fucking, what the fuck, dude? And they're like, "No way, we know Dr. John Van Neumann. We just left him at the USS Eldridge, and he is a young dude, and you're not. I am the same Dr. John Van Neumann from 1943, and I've been waiting for you guys to come here. The USS Eldridge is stuck in hyperspace, and you two are the only ones that can save it.
Only you, Bill and Ted."
So, like, these, now that they know
that's pretty fucking crazy, man.
Right? And so they're like, wait, what? And so now they have this information. And interesting enough, where Dr. John Van Neumann is at this point in time in 1983 is in Montauk, Long Island.
All right.
And he's creating his own project, the Montauk Project. Mm-hmm. I don't know too much.
I know a little bit about the project.
I mean, the only thing I know about the project, and this might sound completely bizarre, even more bizarre than anything that we've already talked about.
No, what do you think?
They were doing mind control experiments on younger boys to have them write pop songs for the Illuminati.
Wow, you know the whole thing. I guess.
What?
You nailed it, man.
That's it?
No, that's not fucking it.
I mean, it would make sense.
Who the hell told you that?
It would make sense to the story. So, like, I mean, what were they into? Like, what were they really trying to do? Like, I know they were doing time travel stuff.
Yeah, that was one of the series of alleged top secret government projects that they would conduct. They would actually conduct them at Camp Hero, which is the Montauk Air Force Station, Long Island.
Right.
They specialized in psychological warfare techniques and exploring vast techniques, successfully achieving time travel. We're talking alleged. So
right.
They would say anything between primary topics being military experiments, such as time travel, teleportation, mind control, contact with alien life, and even, believe it or not, the staging the Apollo moon landing.
They did that there in Montauk.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
That's what they were saying.
They did a little bit of everything, didn't they?
Little this and that. They dabbled. They dabbled. Not to get off topic, but even Netflix TV series Stranger Things was alleged to be inspired by the Montauk Project.
Right. And I'm totally with you on that because that goes along with this Al Bielek story.
Yeah.
So back to Al. So now Ed Cameron is now at Montauk with his brother Duncan, and they're being told that because of the USS Eldridge disappearance, which happened on August 12th, 1943, and the experiment that was happening in 1983, August 12th at Montauk, that their time loop kind of like is fucking each other up. Yeah, it's intertwining in this like weird fucking mess. And Dr. John Van Neuman's like, you guys got to go fucking fix this.
Yeah.
You have to go back to 1943 to the Eldridge,
and stop it,
destroy the generator, and it all will be fucking saved. Right? So that's what happens. They are like, well, we got a fucking time tunnel. So we'll fucking send you back. And they do. So now Ed and his brother are now back on the USS Eldridge, back to looking around, and oh shit, all the fucking guys are infused into the ship again.
Oh, not this again.
And like, so Duncan sees that and he goes, dude, I'm fucking out of here. I don't want to.
He just jumps off the ship again?
He does.
No, he doesn't.
Yes, he does. Duncan jumps off the ship. Ed Cameron stays with the ship and he says, well, I'm going to ride this fucker out.
Yeah, of course.
So he stays on the ship. And so they, the ship reforms and stuff like that and comes back. And so like Ed Cameron gets off the ship, tells his story to the Navy, tells them everything that happened. And, like, I fucking went to 1983 and I, all this stuff, right?
So they probably were like, has to be a 100% true story. This guy can't be, affected by what just happened. This must be the truth. Let's run with this and help this guy out.
You think that's what would happen?
No, I don't.
No, not exactly. You think they would believe their fellow, Navy officer? But
yeah, the guy that they relied on for the experiments at one point.
Right. He still worked for the Navy for another 10 years. And then something even crazier happened, dude. This story just gets even more...
Even crazier than everything you just told me. Please, tell me.
In 1953, Ed Cameron was kind of kidnapped by 7 special ops officers of the Navy that grabbed him. They brought him to the Pentagon. And then he said from there he was transported to, are you ready for this? An alien ship. So he was on this alien ship, and these aliens interviewed him and basically said, what's going on with you? And he said it was telepathically. They interviewed him, and he told them everything that happened and stuff like that. Basically, because of that interview, the aliens and the U.S. government deemed that Ed Cameron knew too much, and something needed to be happen. Something
needed to be happen.
Something needed to be happen.
Are you Ed?
So what happened was, dude, they regressed his aging.
Shut the fuck up.
So what they did is they aged him backwards. So they shrunk his body and aged him backwards.
So
this
he's
is
Benjamin Button.
They Benjamin Buttoned him, and they stuck him with a family in 1927, the Bielek family, and they named him Alfred. And so now
that's the current name that he goes by.
So now he goes by Al Bielek. So now we got Al Bielek back in 1927 with this family, the Bielek family.
Yeah. Restarting his life again.
And, he obviously, his mind has been erased, but he still subconsciously, I think, still has all these thoughts.
So they're like...
roaming around up in there?
They're like repressed memories.
So he doesn't remember him. His actually first memories of being Al Bielek was when he was 9 months old. And he remembers during a Christmas party, the adults talking in the Christmas party, and he actually can understand what they said. Like what they were talking about and what they were saying at 9 months old, dude. As Al went through grade school, he became known as the walking encyclopedia. Like he was super smart. He could, retain things easier than other kids because, well, he probably lived this whole other life, right?
Yeah.
Before graduating high school, he took this like electronics test that he was the only one that passed this test. And the Navy found out about this, and guess what? they recruited him again for the Navy. He was with the Navy
It's
again.
almost like memory foam. It's just,
With electronics and psyops and extraterrestrial programs and all this stuff. He even worked at the Montauk Project in the 80s and stuff with his brother Duncan, but he didn't remember him at the time because he's Al Bielek, right?
Yeah.
So like he's working with his brother and Dr. John Van Neumann and stuff, all this stuff. He's a different person. He's a totally different person. And so like while working with the Montauk, people in the 1980s, time control programs were operational. And so Al participated in like a bunch of like time travel experiments. Both he and Duncan traveled to Mars on several occasions. There's like a unit in Mars, I guess, in the future that he and his brother visited, and they did some tests and stuff. He remembers several trips that he took to a research station in 100,000 BC.
what the fuck?
Right? He went to other planets to get canisters filled with light and dark energy. So, Will, in 1988, Al Bielek sees this movie, and it's called The Philadelphia Experiment. And it's a cheesy movie, bad, made-for-TV type movie. I've seen it. It's pretty good. You know how much I enjoy bad movies.
Yeah.
So in 1988, that's when Al Bielek sees this movie and goes, wait a minute. That's me. This story is me. And he goes, that's when he has this revelation, and that's when all the suppressed memories start coming back of Ed Cameron and all his previous life and of all the things that he's done and stuff. And so like he is like fucking blown away about this information. And so he goes and tries to research all this information of his past life. The internet was not very hopping in 1988. So like that was not easy for him to do.
Yeah.
So he went to people like his brother Duncan and, like Dr. John Van Neumann and, and like started.
Who are not his brother at this point.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
And asked these questions like, do you remember this? And do you remember that? And so he got a lot of information from them. He also got a lot of information from this guy named Preston Nichols, who also worked at the Montauk Project and stuff. So like he worked with him.
He actually went through a lot of that same stuff with the repressed memeries and everything
because
else.
apparently he was part of the Philadelphia experiment and stuff. Apparently something crazy happened with Duncan. They shrunk him and put his soul into another body.
Slam dunked it.
They fucking slam Duncan'd him into another body or something like that. I don't know. You have to go. I didn't dive much into that.
Yeah. You only had so much time.
Story and stuff. But isn't it fascinating that this guy didn't remember all these things that happened to him until he saw a crappy movie in 1988. So then after that, in 1989 is when he came out publicly and said, this is me and this is, I did this and, there's all these, I have all this proof and, all these facts to back it up and stuff. So that's when he started doing lectures around the world. And from 1989 until his death in 2011, he spoke about these incidents and all these things that happened to him endlessly. There are endless hours of, just him speaking about this, and it's kind of fascinating, dude. I mean, whether you believe it or not, any of the shit that I just fucking told you, it's still a fascinating story.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
When you started getting into the Mars stuff, I was like, okay, maybe this is just a tall tale made to fascinate. It's like some science fiction, writing played out in real life. But
to piggyback on that idea, it's funny. I've seen interviews of Al Bielek in like 1990 telling his story, and it's different in the interviews that I've heard him on the radio in the year 2000 because, well, as he puts it, he's remembered more.
He remembers accurate events now.
So, like whether or not he maybe just, embellishes on his story.
Yeah.
And,
one could easily do.
But, dude, I recommend everybody look up Al Bielek on the internet and just watch this guy speak. And whether you believe him or not, he is so dedicated to his story. He is so into it and so just like when he speaks about it, he speaks for a long time. So he'll start talking about his story about how him and his brother jumped off the USS Eldridge and stuff. But first he'll tell you about Nikola Tesla for 45 minutes. So like he talks endlessly with an extreme amount of detail, so much that it's almost hard not to believe, or he's an extremely good science fiction writer.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or not, it's something to share, and it's fun, and it's
fascinating.
entertaining. And there are many stories like this, I think, many mysteries of history I think we will dive into in the future.
I would
of
disagree.
The show. Well, I guess we'll have to just tune in and find out.
I disagree with your histories and mysteries.
So, one of the theories I really liked about this one was the fact that what if Al Bielek was a part of the Montauk Project and he just was brainwashed by the government and, instead of wiping his memory, they implanted this memory of this
all this crazy adventures and stuff?
So that because,
that makes more
like
sense.
he's obviously being able to tell his story and tell this crazy story, and the government is letting him live to tell this fucking bizarre story. And whether they think the public will just think he's completely crazy or whatever, they're letting him do it.
Are there any credentials that back up?
Well, he has all this information that he again tells in his video audio biography, which is like over 6 hours long on the internet. You can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, I think that's why you were late, right? It was fun.
We learned a lot. We learned about this guy, Al Bielek, whether his story is true or not. We had some fun.
At least we learned the story of what he's telling people.
Right. And, hopefully people will tell this story for future generations because they heard it on Evolution of Podcast.
Dum, dum, dum. If you're not evolving...
You're dissolving. See you next week.